Dogman has a unique and totally absurd sense of humor that often defies real-world logic.
You understand?
Seriously, have you noticed that many of the funniest moments in the Dogman movie and books make absolutely no sense?
Of course!
If you really think about it, Dogman's very origin doesn't have a shred of logic. What kind of doctor would actually go through with the brilliant idea of stitching a dog's head onto a human body? No wonder so many people think the DreamWorks movie synopsis sounds completely bizarre, like something straight out of a horror film. The craziest part? It actually works in the story. In real life, even an organ transplant won't work unless the donor and recipient have matching blood types, and even then, the body might still reject it. Now imagine a dog's head being transplanted onto a human body. It's a miracle the whole surgery didn't turn into a disaster. Good thing it worked, right? Otherwise, the movie would have ended in less than 5 minutes. But this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the weird and hilarious logic of the Dogman universe. So buckle up, it's time for another Cinewave. Every time Petey gets defeated by the canine cop, he ends up behind bars. More specifically, he gets locked up in cat jail, where all the feline criminals are sent. But if you stop to think about it, isn't it kind of weird that there's just a prison for cats? Are there really that many criminal cats out there? Actually, the Dogman books reveal that cats face discrimination, meaning a lot of them may have been unfairly imprisoned. But that still doesn't explain why the books also have a fish jail, a dog jail, and even a mayor jail. In Dogman's world, there's a specific prison for every type of criminal. But seriously, are there really enough criminal fish out there besides Flippy? And do they really need an entire prison just for corrupt mayors? Because if they do, the Dogman universe is dealing with some serious political issues. Besides having a ridiculous number of weird prisons, OK City also has some of the strangest customer service hotlines. We see this when the chief calls a certain number after being forced to do so by the mayor. Who answers? A guy working for a company, or something like that, called Life Is Not Fair. And what does this guy do? He picks up the phone, says life is not fair, and hangs up. Yep, that's literally his whole job. So for some reason, there's an actual business making money just by answering calls and repeating that phrase. And apparently, people actually call in just to be reminded that life isn't fair. If I had to guess, I'd bet this hotline was set up by the mayor herself so she could force her employees to hear it every time they complain about how unfair she is. That sounds exactly like something she'd do, doesn't it?
Life's not fair.
Now, let me ask you a question. What would a police officer typically keep in his desk drawer? A, a gun, B, a police radio, C, important investigation documents, or D, a secret underground hideout? If you pick D, congratulations, you're absolutely right, at least when it comes to Dogman's police force. The chief literally has a massive underground hideout that can be accessed through his office drawer. This place is so deep that there are even dinosaur bones embedded in the walls. Don't even bother trying to figure out how he built all that, because none of this ridiculously over-the-top scene makes any sense. And it gets even weirder when we find out that the whole hideout exists just to store a vault. Okay, fair enough. The vault must contain something super valuable, right? Nope, the vault just leads to another drawer in his office. So, the hideout serves absolutely no purpose. The chief goes through this entire ridiculous journey just to open another vault in his office, and guess what's inside? A tiny pair of binoculars. After all that trouble, the so-called secret hideout was just a total waste of time. And to make it even funnier, Dogman, who was just as disappointed as we were, pulled out a much bigger pair of binoculars from his own pocket. If you also think Dogman's humor is on another level, drop a hashtag humor in the comments. Very few people in OK City know where Petey lives, which is surprising, especially considering he's constantly being hunted down by the entire police force. And that's actually impressive since he literally lives in a building with a giant sign that says Petey's Secret Lab in huge letters. Oh, and there are several arrows pointing right at it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the cops saw those signs and thought, nah, Petey would never be dumb enough to announce his own hideout. And in the end, they totally fell for a classic case of reverse psychology. One funny thing about Officer Knight is that despite being highly skilled, he was also super slow on the uptake. No joke, Greg the dog was smarter than Knight. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, Knight tells the chief to evacuate people from the area where Petey planted a bomb. The problem? The bomb was placed in an abandoned factory, meaning there was literally no one there. Even after the chief pointed this out, Officer Knight kept insisting that they needed to evacuate the area. How did someone this clueless even become a cop? Sarah Hadoff is known as the world's greatest reporter, and honestly, that kind of makes sense. She's always on the news and is a great investigator. But there's one part of her job she really needs to improve: her interviews. because at the beginning of the Dogman movie, she seems determined to be the worst interviewer ever. She asks the chief a bunch of questions but doesn't let him answer a single one. Instead, she just keeps shoving the microphone into his mouth while firing off even more questions. In the end, the poor guy doesn't get to say anything, and yet no one seems to notice how completely unprofessional she is. But one of the wildest things in this universe is, without a doubt, the fact that Petey was able to buy a cloning machine online. In real life, cloning is extremely complicated, and attempting to create an identical human clone is not only insanely difficult, it's also illegal. Not that anyone's actually pulled it off. But in Dogman's world, you can just order a machine that does it online like it's the most normal thing ever. Dogman really is something else, huh? And even the cloning machine Petey bought comes with a rule that makes 0 sense. Apparently, the machine has to stay on for 18 years to create a full-grown adult clone since it develops inside at the same rate as a human. That's why Petey ended up cloning a baby. He didn't read all the instructions before using the machine. But seriously, has anyone ever had the patience to wait nearly 2 decades for an adult clone? Because if not, this thing is only useful for people who want a biological child but can't or don't want to go through pregnancy. Petey is a cat, and no one finds that weird. After all, in this universe, cats walk and talk just like humans. The books even show other animals with human-like traits, like the villain Piggy, a criminal pig who hangs out with other animal crooks. So far so good, it's just part of Dogman's world building. But then, why don't dogs act like humans too? Dogman can stand on 2 legs, but that's only because he's a fusion of a dog and a human. The other dogs, like Sarah Hadoff's pup, are just regular dogs. Now that I think about it, even Dogman can't talk. And fish? They're not intelligent either. Flippy is an exception, just like Dogman, because he got his intelligence from a special substance. So, is there any explanation for why some animals are humanoid while others act like real-world animals? Knowing how chaotic the Dogman universe is? Probably not. We may not sell cloning machines, but we're always dropping videos about your favorite animated series and movies, so how about hitting that subscribe button? By now, it's pretty clear that almost every character in Dogman has their not-so-bright moments, but the one who takes innocence to a whole new level is Big Jim. Petey has tricked Big Jim into jumping onto a seesaw just so his own weight would launch him out of prison. He even stole Big Jim's balloons and used them to float away and escape yet again. Basically, Petey always finds a way to outsmart his cellmate. So, why does Big Jim still consider Petey a friend? The truth is, the poor guy is so innocent that he doesn't even realize when he's being played. In a scene early in the movie, Officer Knight almost runs over a crate that some workers were carrying. What no one could have expected was that inside the crate, there were a bunch of letter B's. Why? No one knows. It's just another one of this universe's many unexplained mysteries. A possible explanation is that the workers were on their way to build a sign, but even then, why would they need so many B's? Speaking of letters, we have to talk about the speech bubbles and sound effects that sometimes appear when the characters talk. It's a common thing in comic books, but in Dogman, even the DreamWorks movie adaptation keeps the same effect, since it's based on a comic. The weird part? The floating letters aren't just visual effects, characters can actually interact with them. At one point, Petey slashes them with his claws, and in another scene, when Dogman cries, his sound effects fly all the way to Sarah Hadoff's apartment and literally slam into her window. So, could those letter B's the workers were carrying actually be speech bubble leftovers? Maybe their job is to collect fallen letters and clean them up. Petey isn't just a genius when it comes to creating high-tech weapons and vehicles, he's also a mastermind at escaping prison. But even for a cat as smart as him, there's no way he should be able to escape this many times. Sure, the mayor herself admitted that she put her own brother in charge of cat jail, and he doesn't seem all that competent. But still, how does that explain so many successful escapes? Especially when Petey's escape strategies, while clever, don't make much sense. I mean, there's no way he's light enough to float away just by holding on to a few helium balloons. The video's wrapping up, but we've got 2 other awesome ones on your screen right now! Just click on whichever looks the most fun.